We came to bring the city on one accord. But one accord means that we must have equal protection under the law. There are those that are saying peace, but they really just mean quiet. Because in order to establish peace, you must have fair justice for everyone. We want real peace. We don't want to just be told to shut up and suffer in silence. We must have answers.
Welcome back to Byline. I'm Brian Lilly. That's the Reverend Al Sharpton. I'm not sure about calling that man a reverend, but that's Al Sharpton demanding answers in Ferguson, Missouri. The political activist was one of many community leaders and media members to descend on the city after the death of Michael Brown. Unfortunately, the city went up in flames after a grand jury ruled they would not charge the police officer in the shooting of Michael Brown. But is the damage already done? Sun News contributor Gavin McInnes joins us from New York. Gavin, your latest column for Tacky Mag is about the unreported hate crimes in America. We hear lots about Michael Brown, about Trayvon, about Eric Garner, and sometimes rightfully so, I think especially in the Garner case, but you don't hear about the black on white hate crimes to the same degree, do you?
No, and especially now that a lot of these hate crimes are because of the way the media has portrayed Mike Brown and Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin. There are murders because of that portrayal, and they are racial murders. Just last week, we had a guy in Detroit. He said to the victim's family he tortured and murdered, him and his friend, tortured and murdered 2 white teenagers. And when asked to apologize at the end when he gets his sentencing, he apologizes to the mother and father of Mike Brown and Eric Garner.
And says, we just have pictures of him there. That was Frederick Young yawning. Yawning during his court case, yawning as the victim impact statements are read. The judge actually jumped in and said, are we keeping you awake? Are we keeping you awake? But he says, in the end, Black Lives Matter. Why isn't that spread across the cable news networks incessantly? Why isn't that the lead story at the New York Times?
Without exception, that's what people say when I tell them. They're shocked. Even in this building, I'm walking around CNN and they go, what? Why isn't anyone talking about that? You say it to liberals and they're shocked. And it keeps happening. Now, obviously this guy's insane, right? But we are enabling these lunatics to commit racial hate crimes and then hiding it with the narrative. We're literally letting them get away with murder. There was a Bosnian guy. Forget that he's Bosnian, okay? There was a white guy. They had no way of knowing he was Bosnian. He looks like he's in Jersey Shore. He was murdered by a black mob with hammers for simply trying to protect his street during the Ferguson riots. No one mentioned it, and the police refused to say it was racial.
In the case of Frederick Young, he and his friend Philando Hunter killed 2 teenagers, Jacob Kundla and Jordan Bobish, both of them young whites. They hid them. There was a Crime Stoppers alert looking for them. They just dumped their bodies. So, look, fine, they're being convicted. But again, this should have been played up as much as Eric Garner. I think that Eric Garner is a case of police going definitely too far. But it doesn't get the same attention, and Al Sharpton doesn't show up and say, why are you being racist? Al Sharpton doesn't show up and preach to the community in Detroit over something like this.
The liberal left will tell you that's apples and oranges because these guys are criminals and they get convicted, but cops get away with murder. No, they don't. Cops get convicted, okay? The recent cases were examined by the courts, and they were innocent. When Justin Volpe raped Abner Louima with a broken broomstick, he got 30 years. The average sentence for rape is something like 65 months. We prosecute bad guys on both sides, but the liberal has chosen one tiny minority of cases, and they said, that's the narrative we're going with. Choo-woo, full steam ahead.
All right, so do you think that people like Sharpton, like the incessant media coverage of a Michael Brown case, of the Ferguson case, do you think that drives further violence?
It definitely drives further violence, and there's been case upon case. There was just a guy, there was an Iraq war vet who was beaten by 20 people when he was down. He's got brain injuries. He's still in the hospital. We had another guy that was beaten for Trayvon, beaten by a mob for almost an hour. He's still in a coma. This keeps happening again and again. And sometimes these mobs will just do it not because of Trayvon or Mike Brown, but because they were bored. Christopher Lane was murdered. A white kid was murdered just for something to do.
All right, we've got cases of older vets being beaten up as well. We had the knockout game that we were reporting on for a while, but when this comes up, the Liberal left, including Sharpton, will just, let's not talk about it.
It's not a convenient narrative. It doesn't pay their bills. It doesn't get them a desk by the window. It doesn't get them a pat on the back from their editor. But the insane irony of all this is, by you pushing that stupid cops vigilantes narrative and ignoring gang violence, you're actually also killing blacks. There was 7,000 blacks murdered last year, almost all of them, 94% by blacks. So this liberal narrative isn't just hurting the Christopher Lanes and these innocent Detroit teens trying to buy prescription drugs. They are turning their back on black lives, too. It's infuriating.
Chicago is the best example of that, and the gun violence and gang violence that happens there, almost all of it related to illegal gang activity. Gavin, thanks for bringing common sense again, and your column will be up shortly at tackymag.com. Gavin,
thanks.
In News.